And welcome back to AI Ate My Homework. I'm Jason Zarnt, and this is our second episode with Dr. Andrea Olinger, Director of Composition at the University of Louisville, and Cecilia Durbin, Adjunct Faculty Member in English and full-time staff at the U of L Libraries. In our previous episode, we discussed the specifics of the English 102 assignment sequence. But as we wrapped up that conversation, we started touching on something larger. Now let's rejoin our conversation with Andrea and Cecilia.
Can I go back to the secondary source analysis that Claude did? Something that I found interesting because it does a really good job of contextualization, which is the first step of the section on each source. It's really difficult to read a citation to know this is a scholarly source, this is a magazine article, and then also just the technical language. We are asking students to read scholarly sources, so they're encountering disciplinary language like randomized controlled trials. So, I mean, the fact that they're using a word that actually is, I would say, that makes sense to me. If they've read a study that's an RCT, even if they may not know what that means.
So the Claude writes, Chen, a psychology professor at Northwestern with expertise in digital media's psychological impacts, designed this research for academic and student affairs professionals seeking evidence-based interventions. Now, unless the article has a bio statement, that really takes some digging, like looking at the professor's website, which we actually want them to do.
Yeah.
To know who the article is for, you have to go to the journal's About page. It is doing a lot of research. So if a student gave this to me, I would be so impressed and so excited that they really grasped the context of this source. So I was just fascinated by these first two paragraphs. And if a student did write this, I would be just blown away. And so it's rare that you get such developed context.
Yeah. Well, and that is one of the caveats is we want to uplift and encourage our students. We don't want to put them down. We don't want to underestimate their abilities. So when you have a paper like this, say, in our in-class writing assignment, you didn't know what a complete sentence was, and now you've submitted this level work. And in addition to that, you learn how to do this and make these moves by reading yourself. It doesn't add up. It's just messy,
You know what, where are you learning? But then now I'm thinking like, well, I need to teach this better. Like if I have these prompts in contextualization, who is the author, who's the audience? I think we could design a whole activity. Let's do this together.
Both of you are raising a really interesting point about, so we designed these assignments in these classes to be a challenge, to be not in the sense that you want students to not do well on it, but the average student should get to a C to a B. That's the goal. And so I think the question of where does AI fit? If it's going to be part of it, if it is, which we can say that for a fact, it is part right now. How do we work with the students to say, let's choose the hard way, even if, as you said, you may not get the right answer, you may not get the thing that you think that you need or want, but you're going to get the thing that will help you learn.
I think that one of the things I love about this whole situation, even though it's very frustrating, is that it's frustrating, is that it's a challenge. And because of that, it's forcing us to think about new ways that we can teach and forcing us to find new opportunities to approach getting this information into our students in a new way. And I think that eventually, maybe sooner than later, we're going to have to rethink the schedule of assignments in my class. But I think we have to start rethinking English Gen Ed courses too. And that is not my purview, but I mean like the sequence of classes and how they fit into the overall curriculum. And when I say rethink, I don't mean completely get rid of the English classroom. I think on the contrary, this is the opportunity that those of us in the humanities have been waiting for, that like, yes, finally they value us. You know what I mean? They care about us now. They really, really like us. And so we have to, I think, harness that and step up and rise to the occasion and say, this is what we can offer. We have to think outside of the box to figure out how to incorporate this in an ethical way that still supports students developing critical thinking and reading and writing skills while also not being overly idealistic and assuming that AI is going to go. So how can we embrace it while still adhering to our standards as a composition program? I don't know what that looks like.
I was going to say you had the answer. You were waiting to give it to us.
I don't have any answers.
There's so much pressure on English 101 and 102 to teach students how to write, and that's truly laughable and impossible because we're always learning how to write new things. We're always growing as writers. And one is never mastering writing. So if I had my secret plan would be to like work with faculty in every unit and every course. How can you sort of beef up writing to learn and learning to write in your course? And WEC, Writing Enriched Curriculum, is one sort of fairly recent way that that's being done, where kind of from the ground up faculty in each unit are thinking about what are the writing needs, like surveying alums, surveying students, surveying faculty, and it's really sort of research-based approach to figuring out, okay, how can we infuse writing throughout the curriculum from first year to senior, done by discipline, faculty in the departments in a facilitated way. But my approach to teaching 101 and what we do with the new instructors, as you know, is a writing about writing course where writing is the theme of the course, so very meta. And students are researching their own writing histories and experiences and researching future writing and what that might look like. And because even though you can't teach how to write in a semester, you can communicate or engage students in a process of inquiry about writing. And so they can develop a meta-awareness of how to think about writing in future situations. And so AI as a text generation tool, like that can be part of that writing about writing approach, sort of what are the affordances, what are the harms, making that a subject of critical inquiry. Is one thing.
We're talking about the possibilities, the inevitable future, and how we can ready ourselves for what's to come or what's already here. But I think there's also a place to look back, to the past and see what did educators used to do? How did they evaluate a student's ability? We're already beginning to see some teachers, especially writing in English professors, going back to the Blue Book, going back to the oral exam, which I think do have a place. I mean, now if you really need to assess a student's ability and progress, which you do, the oral exam or the Blue Book, I think, are the most AI-proof things that you can do.
I see the value of that spontaneous writing, but I feel like for any summative assessment, if you really want thoughtful writing, Blue Book is not the way to go. So some other ideas for like what we can do in the classroom that I've been thinking about. So Linda Rogers, who's a longtime faculty member in composition, teaches the iSearch assignment. And this is kind of a classic pedagogy. There's a lot of interesting scholarship about the problems with the research paper. And Ken McCrory is this big name in composition studies. He wrote about the iSearch. The final product is a research narrative where you're going through your research process. And Linda has been doing this for a while. And so I think that could be kind of the next step in terms of modifying this. We can amp up the personal reflection. And she has wonderful scaffolding on how to do that. And seeing the second version of Claude with a lot of the first person language, I'm sure a student could prompt an AI tool to produce that too.
Yeah.
But it is one way to make it more personal, where it's all about the process and kind of what surprised you about these sources, and then where did you go next, and what was confusing. That's one idea. In the secondary source analysis assignment sheet, one of the requirements is a behind-the-scenes screencast, and that's basically like a reflective letter, but done as a screencast where the student sort of walks through the paper, talking about their process, parts where they want feedback on. And I think that is a way for the student to take ownership, that reflective piece is, this was my process, here's, this is my favorite part of the paper, this is where I was a little confused, could you give me feedback on this? Whether they do that in writing or in a screencast form or some other form, I think that becomes all the more important. I want students to be not writing sort of generic papers for the teacher, but figuring out what problem are you trying to solve with your research, and then, what should I create to communicate solution? And so that has to reach an audience beyond teacher.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that there's room to do that, or to at least get them thinking about it in that way. You can do a prompt for anything that you want. I guess I keep going back to the Blue Book because my biggest concern is we're at a point where almost everything we're grading is AI generated. Almost everything that we're grading is AI generated.
Are you literally?
Literally. They're using AI in some way, some of them bolder than others, but almost everything we are reading, and I'm not going to say from 100% of the students, but I would say easily 80 or 90% of the students are using AI in some way. And I don't want to spend my life grading AI generated papers. And so we have to make it watertight. When we find other solutions to it, that's great. But I can't think of one except for one that does not involve a computer.
What about ungrading and labor-based grading or portfolio approaches, like with process approaches where it's all about revision and exploration? If we remove kind of the grade from the picture, and the purpose of the writing class is to experiment and play around and explore and get readers' reactions to what you're doing, I would hope that there's less incentive for AI-generated work, because if students feel like, okay, I know I can succeed in this class, so I know I'm going to get an A or I'm going to get at least a B in this class. That kind of can free a student up to feel like, I can do it. I can play around. I can mess up. I do not have to use it. Like the pressure, I would hope, decreases for AI use without traditional grading.
I think here, and this is so difficult, I'm going to have to think about this some more. Students aren't used to being challenged, but they respond very well to being challenged when you don't give them other options. When you don't give them options or the temptation to take the easy route, they won't. And in fact, after the process, they have a new sense of confidence. Like, I accomplished this thing that I didn't think I was going to, but you have to get there, and I don't know how to get there. You know what I mean?
Two more things that I've been thinking about as we've had this conversation about interventions that we can do as teachers. There's this great book on teaching reading called The Elements and Pleasures of Difficulty. And they talk about a difficulty paper where you've assigned a reading and students actually write about what part of this reading was most difficult and why. And this assignment is all about normalizing difficulty and difficult reading and sort of unpacking it and doing it together. So that is one thing that I think could be something that to try. And then one of my favorite writing studies teacher scholars is Jody Shipka at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And she has done a lot of work on multimodal pedagogy. Her whole approach is students in college are always told sort of how to write, sort of both what to write and how. Times New Roman, 12-point font, double-spaced, put your thesis as the last sentence, underline your thesis. Yeah. And that's like the bulk of writing instruction sometimes. And her whole approach is students need to figure out for themselves what form, what materials, what media should they use to best convey their message. And so they really need to think both about what they're creating and as well as who's going to interact with it and how. And so she has these very creative prompts for students, but they're extremely open-ended. Students will have to figure out what is their creation going to take. If a video, why? Some students might do something even more out of the box. Some of our students did a dance, for instance. And students then have to write a very detailed reflection about the rhetorical choices they made. Why did they make this? What constraints? There's a ton of writing where they're analyzing their process. And we can't know what students will have to write outside of our walls. Who knows? But if they have to decide how they're going to do their research and what it's going to look like, I think that even though she has published this before AI, it's relevant, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
Now.
Well, I want to thank both of you. I'm sure we will continue this conversation in the future, hopefully in the near future. Andrea, Cecilia, thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chase.